Purple tunnel.
Get a bad paper cut.
It's not bad. John. Okay, we'll call the March 21st meeting of Lock Haven City Council to order. Rise from over the sides, followed by pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Councilmember Byerly.
Here.
Councilmember Conklin.
Here.
Councilmember Missouri. Here. Councilmember Stevenson.
Here.
Councilmember Brinker.
Here.
Councilmember Morris.
Yep.
Mayor Long.
Here. Approval of the minutes of the March 7th regular meeting.
I will just note the date at the top is wrong, but that has been corrected.
Move accepted. Have a motion? Second. And a second. Any further discussion on the motion? Call for the vote.
Councilmember Byerly.
Yes.
Councilmember Conklin.
Yes.
Councilmember Missouri.
Yes.
Councilmember Stevenson.
Yes.
Councilmember Brinker.
Yes.
Councilmember Morris.
Yes.
Mayor Long.
Okay, yes. Public comments. 4A, request to move the date of the September closure of East Main Street.
This is what council entertained at the last meeting. Council just needs to take official action at this.
Motion and a second. Any other discussion on the motion? Call for the vote.
Councilmember Byerly.
Yes.
Councilmember Conklin.
Yes.
Councilmember Missouri.
Yes.
Councilmember Stevenson.
Yes.
Councilmember Brinker.
Yes.
Councilmember Morris.
Yes.
Mayor Long.
Yes. 4B, request to use the airport for Wings Over Piper.
We have the good fortune of having Kevin and Dana here this evening to address this request.
Hello, my name is Kevin Zigman. I live at 727 East Bald Eagle Street in Lock Haven. I am the event manager for Wings and Williamsport RC Model Club in Linden. And for the last 19 years, we've held Wings Over Piper at the airport, first weekend of August. It's usually been a Friday, Saturday, Sunday event. Over the years, the event has grown. We've had more and more people show up for early arrivals, some people coming in Wednesday during the day. From just about every state bordering PA, we get visitors to come in and fly their RC models for the day at an historic venue such as William T. Piper. So I'm asking for permission for using the airport for Thursday, August 4th, Friday, August 5th, Saturday, August 6th, and Sunday, August 7th for 2022 for our 20th annual Wings Over Piper. And I'd also like to, there's a lot of, I think most everybody is new from when we started the event way back in 2003. And I'd like to respectfully invite any one of the council members or members of government to come down and visit with us for the day, for the weekend, just to see what it's all about, and visit some of our, visit with some of our guests that come in to fly and what we're all about. So I just ask for your permission and your support that you've had for the last 19 years for us. Thank you.
Having been here for the very first, they came and asked us, something that's been great for our area. I think it's fantastic. Thank you for everything you guys do. What's the wish, council?
Question, do you have an application? I don't see a request used to going through the community. It's not in the packet.
You want?
No, I
Yeah,
just
we received a letter.
wanted to make sure you had one official on file and complying with the insurances and everything.
It's not in your packet.
Now jump straight to Special Olympics.
Mine must be special.
Yeah,
Well, yours is special.
Yeah, wonder who put this together. Who's the whale?
Do I have a motion?
I do, move it.
I second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion on the motion? Call for the vote, please.
Councilmember Wiley,
Yes.
Councilmember Conklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Missouri,
Yes.
Councilmember Stevenson,
Yes.
Councilmember Brinker,
Yes.
Councilmember Morris,
Yes.
Mayor Long.
Yes.
I hope you have good weather.
Yeah.
We've been lucky in the last
And a
19
good
years.
time.
Yep, thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Sorry.
That's fine. 4C, request for use of Betty Park for Special Olympics.
The Clinton County Special Olympics is requesting the use of Petty Park for their softball practices, and I will make sure that their practice schedule does not conflict with other organizations that use the park. And they're sending me their insurance certificate as well.
What's the wish of council?
Move the request for Special Olympics.
I second.
Second. Any further discussion? Call for the vote.
Councilmember Wiley,
Yes.
Councilmember Conklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Missouri,
Yes.
Councilmember Stevenson,
Yes.
Councilmember Brinker,
Yes.
Councilmember Morris,
Yes.
Mayor Long.
Yes. 4D, request for Triangle Park for Roads to Peace.
This is a request from Rose to Peace Clinton County Women's Center for the use of Triangle Park on April 21st and 22nd for their annual Sexual Assault Awareness Month activities. This is usually just like a table. Last year, I believe they also had set up a very moving program of like outlines of people and everything. So it's the same event as last year, and they are providing me the insurance certificate as well, and we'll follow the regulations.
What's the wish of council?
I'll move to approve.
Second.
I have a motion on the floor and a second. Any further discussion on this motion? Call for the vote.
Councilmember Byerly,
Yes.
Councilmember Conklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Missouri,
Yes.
Councilmember Stevenson,
Yes.
Councilmember Brinker,
Yes.
Councilmember Morris,
Yes.
Mayor Long.
Yes. 4E, request for Zendel Park for 2023 10K.
This is a request from Craig Fleming, the organizer of Boulder Beast and also the Fire on the Rocks 10K, and he's putting in his 2023 request now for March 18th for the same event that went on last weekend. And despite the snow, I heard it went really, really well, so.
You guys involved in, you get involved in that, don't you?
Not in this particular one. Francis, not.
Oh.
I ran,
Oh, did you?
yes. And it did go very well, even with the snow.
Nice.
Well done. It was a nice event.
I'd be carrying the,
I thought I would have to be carried out, but I wasn't.
what's the wish of council?
I move approval.
I second.
I have a motion on the floor and a second. Any further discussion on the motion? Call for the vote, please.
Councilmember Byerly,
Yes.
Councilmember Conklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Missouri,
Yes.
Councilmember Stevenson,
Yes.
Councilmember Brinker,
Yes.
Councilmember Morris,
Yes.
Mayor Long.
Yes. 4F, resolution number 2022-09.
This is a request from, excuse me, Stella A's to use Sarah's Alley again. Council has the ability for 90-day periods to create an exception to special traffic and parking regulations. And so this is for your consideration from May 1st to July 31st, which would have to be reviewed again by council at its July 25th meeting.
What's the wish of council?
I'll move approval.
Second.
Motion on the floor and a second. Any further discussion, questions, comments? Call for the vote.
Councilmember Byerly,
Yes.
Councilmember Conklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Missouri,
Yes.
Councilmember Stevenson,
Yes.
Councilmember Brinker,
Yes.
Councilmember Morris,
Yes.
Mayor Long.
Yes. We have any other public comments or requests?
I have none here.
Unfinished business. 5A, the Stormwater Management Equivalent Residential Unit Assessment Report.
That's a mouthful.
It is.
Last November, the Director of Public Works gave a presentation to council to see if council was interested in having a study done on a stormwater management fee for the community. And so Mark Glenn from Glenn Dobson Informant is here to give the results of that study for council's consideration.
Okay, thank you. I've got a brief presentation tonight. I believe everybody should have a copy of the presentation and also on the screen. For the last year and a half, city staff and our firm have been involved in doing research on potential options for stormwater management, which includes the whole panoply of things related to stormwater, including streets, curbs, drains, things of that nature. And how, and to explore different options, as Greg discussed, concerning revenues and needs and wants and needs and resources in order to address problems as they relate to stormwater. So on the next slide, as Greg mentioned, Tony gave a very comprehensive view of the problems of streets in the city. And I won't do anything but reference that. It was a very informative and detailed presentation outlining the scope of the challenges that the Department of Public Works faces. On the next slide is just basically a recap of city streets and stormwater systems. And basically in your inventory, there are 45 miles of alleys and streets, approximately 50 miles of curb, 26 miles of storm sewer, 1,300 storm inlets, and over 300 manholes. The stormwater interlinked street problems really can be summarized in one word, and that is drainage, because things that impact streets, gutters, pipes are the amount of stormwater and the ability to convey that stormwater to the downstream systems, which in all cases here end up in the levee area. On the next page, we're showing the distance, sample of the mapping. The city has very good mapping of the system, so at least we know where everything is. It doesn't really indicate the conditions in those cases, but in any event, major problems we have with drainage are sinkholes, potholes, pavement damage, especially along the gutter line, lots of missing and damaged curb, collapsed pipe, failing inlets, a system basically it's anywhere from 50 to 75 years old, and in many cases it's reached the end of its useful life. Now the next slide is just a typical city street that I believe it's out on East Bald Eagle.
Yeah, East Bald Eagle Street, that's where the CDBG paving will be done this year.
This is very typical, and what we're concentrating here is along the curb line. The top left-hand picture is basically an area near an intersection, with an old inlet, and lots of damage around the curb gutter area. Usually water is laying in there that causes the ground to become saturated. The bearing for the pavement is less there, and you start to see in all these pictures evidence of pavement failure. And depending on the nature of the pavement, it can actually spread across the entire width of the street. So, you know, we view street problems and the conveyance system to be a drainage problem primarily. The next slide, we just wanted to summarize system needs and fiscal challenges. And what we have tentatively established for a system-wide needs outline is have a goal over the next 34 years to completely renew the city streets, including curbs, storm sewers, new pavement, in some cases, new pavement structure down at the base course. We're thinking that this is going to involve 25 street miles, an annual cost of anywhere from $750,000 to over $1 million in constant dollars. So the city is potentially over that time frame looking at about $30 to $40 million in investment in its streets. And also there's some opportunities here. Anytime there's a sanitary sewer or water line replacement, a lot of these elements can be combined in a simple project. State College Borough does a lot of this work. I think it's Tony can attest. However, they have a lot of resources, obviously, to draw upon. And that's one area here we'd like to cover at the bottom half of the slide. Currently, the city is the recipient of about $248,000 in liquid fuel funding, which is usually applied to repaving projects, inlet repairs, and also ramp construction around inlets. Of course, there's your annual budget allocations that the city applies. Basically, that's for maintenance of streets and drains. Occasionally, we have CDBG funding. There are some paving projects, as indicated. However, most of that money is going to be dedicated, has been dedicated for parks, but will be dedicated for areas over a multi-year time frame, for instance, in Sunset Pines. Occasionally, we get PennDOT funding for streetscape projects. I think most recently on Church Street. But basically, though, that's limited to curbs, sidewalks, street lighting, and some repaving. We don't get anything underground in terms of storm drains or anything of that nature. So that's limited. They will not fund underground utilities unless it's a requirement or a relocation involved. And occasionally, I believe there's some limited scope budgeted capital expenditures for street projects, but that's on a year-to-year basis and depends on the needs and the requirements of the city budget. So on the next slide, basically what we're looking at here are a three-pronged approach. In the upper right-hand corner is a storm sewer being installed on a street. That's really key in order that the storm sewer is undersized or in poor condition, that be replaced, and that has to serve as really the primary conveyance of getting water off the streets and down to the discharge point. Below that is a cement mixer showing pouring of concrete curb gutter. And this is important because we establish a flow line along the gutter in order to get the water from the street into the inlet. But we need a hard surface to do that. And then for obviously street construction, sometimes this would involve an overlay. If the street is of a condition that it can be overlaid, and other times we may need to go down to the base course and put in stone base and bituminous concrete base course and another layer or two of wearing course. So it depends on the condition of the street. Those are the three major items that we're looking to fund as part of a program. So on the next slide, people are looking at options. Pennsylvania municipalities are aggressively trying to address many of the same problems the city has with the stormwater program. As this was introduced previously, obviously, but there are a number of municipalities that view stormwater and drainage in the same plane as water and sewer. The only difference is water and sewer has user charges they can assess in terms of water and sewer rates. Fortunately for streets and drains, we don't have that kind of revenue source at the required scale. So a stormwater program involves the creation of some separate entity that will generate revenues and manage and apply resources. And they also have the ability to acquire grants and loans with the ability to repay loans on that basis. The stormwater program basically relies on what's called an equivalent residential unit. And that is the unit that would apply on a flat rate basis to every residential property in the city. Now, get into some details on that later, but this as equivalent residential unit is a square footage of impervious area that's on a person's property, like their house, the roof, a concrete sidewalk, a blacktop driveway that has no ability to absorb runoff. It simply goes down a downspout onto a surface or directly on the street. And there's been quite a bit of work in determining what that square footage is for the property in the city. And we'll get into that here on the next couple of slides. But on the next slide, we do want to give you a indication of some of the municipalities in Pennsylvania that either have separate stormwater authority or the stormwater department within the context of municipal government. Places like Clarion, Chambersburg, Gettysburg, Campbell, Harrisburg, Evansburg, and there's many townships, especially in the eastern part of the state, that have these programs. The next slide, there's several different ways that a stormwater program can be funded and established. One is it could be through the current city administration, whereby a stormwater department, separate and on its own standalone basis, or part of, for instance, the City Department of Public Works as a separate bureau. In order to do that, enabling ordinances have to be established, and also there's various coordination elements for the establishment and assessment of the fee to not only residential properties but also to non-residential areas. And this one involved lots of interdepartmental communication, for instance, engineering, GIS, admin, planning, and DPW. Or people are going in the direction of stormwater authority, which is established, created by the city, members appointed by the city, where this authority establishes its rules and regulations. It's more or less a standalone operation, incorporating the above functions as financing and contracting authority to do projects. Assumed under a stormwater authority would still be the Department of Public Works to provide overall guidance and also the actual work of doing the hard maintenance of streets and drains. The next slide is how we computed the method for an equivalent residential unit. And you'll see that box on the right-hand side, typical resident. And what is done here is that area in gray, which is the house, and the spackled area there in brown, which is the driveway and sidewalk, is computed separately. And what we did, and we'll get into a little bit later here, is we took every residential property in the city, including all 4 zoning areas, and involved about 3,300 separate parcels. We basically did a calculation for each one of those, and we did some statistical analysis to come up with what a typical residential property would contribute on a gross aggregate basis of the amount of square feet of runoff for property. That is what is called an equivalent residential unit for a typical property. In this case, this was from a system in Virginia. It was determined that 2,800 square feet represented the impervious area for a typical residential property. Now, how are non-residential properties derived? Well, each one of those have to be individually measured and assessed. Let's say we have a equivalent residential unit of 2,800 square feet, and we find out that this commercial property has 5,600 square feet. So if we divide 5,600 by 2,800, we have 2 equivalent residential units. If we say a residential unit is $100 per year for that commercial property with 2 EDUs, it would be $200 per year. So this ERU, which is actually very similar to a sewer equivalent dwelling unit, an EDU, it's just a common unit value in order to assess stormwater type assessment. What is being proposed here, at least for the residential, would be a flat rate based on some determined amount of dollars per year, which is to be determined. Now, if we look on the next slide, how this is broken down between residential and non-residential. Currently, about 54% of all the residential property, of all the property area in the city, 54% is residential, 46% is non-residential. There are approximately 3,222 parcels, of which 420 are vacant, leaving a total and also a total impervious area of the city of about 46%. So if we divide the total, we come up with an ERU of a typical residential property in the city of 2,700 square feet. We looked at this through various zoning areas, and they're pretty close. There's some, plus or minus in terms of the zoning areas, but it runs pretty close to this figure. For non-residential, total impervious area in the city for non-residential properties is 54%. So if we take for each parcel, how many ERUs we would divide for that particular parcel, its total impervious area that is measured, we're in the GIS mapping, divided by 2,700, and we come up with the number of ERUs that would be assessed to that particular parcel. So as we speak here, the equivalent residential units for residential properties in the city are 2,800 units. For non-residential, it's 4,528. So this means 62% of all the revenue, of all the runoff generated in the city could basically be assigned to non-residential properties, with the other 38% coming from residences. So the impact of that is shown on the next slide. And Greg had us work up a range of ERU per year that we could assess. And the top line is generate $200,000 a year in stormwater funding. Approximately $27.29 is the ERU figure for a residential property. $27.29 per year. The rest is through non-residential. On the next line, for a $50 equivalent residential unit per year, that would generate about $367,000, and $100 per year would generate anywhere, let's say around $750,000. So there you have, a range there that may be something that could be considered in order to generate revenue. On the next slide, we canvassed the number of municipal stormwater programs as listed, and we also indicated how that agency is implemented by the municipality. Its population as of 2019, median household income. And we're showing a range there anywhere from $25 to $100 for average residential charge. And the average, which excludes Lock Haven, would be about $75. So as indicated, it depends on the amount of revenue that the city wishes to generate. And that's also related in some respects to needs. Now, on the next slide, there are a number of programs that now are funding stormwater project. Most prominent among these are Penvest. This was a sample award to the Borough of Clarion for a large stormwater project in the borough. It was about a $1.9 million project. $560,000 was through a 1% loan through Penvest, and over $1 million was provided by Penvest for approximately half the project cost, and the rest was local share. But you can see here where Penvest has, this is just an example of some of the stormwater projects they fund. The Clarion system was able to pay for the debt service on the loan as part of the revenue they generate through the stormwater fee. I will say though, there's lots of money coming available for stormwater, this basic infrastructure. The Federal Infrastructure Act has funds that are going to be administered in Pennsylvania through PennDOT and Penvest, and there's going to be some significant programs that are either left over from some of the CARES money or the ARP funds to provide competitive type projects for funding, and those are all grants. I've not seen that level of grant activity in many years. Finally, if the city wishes to establish a stormwater program, there are a number of steps that would need to be considered. First, which would be the institutional arrangement in terms of how a system like this would be administered. Legal requirements for rules and regulations and ordinances. There has to be a condition assessment and some sort of engineering report done on the streets in order to describe the scope of the problem, establish priorities, and estimate project costs. Need to figure out and finalize the ERU calculations. Also, there'd be a public information program that would need to be set up in order to provide information to the residents and property owners. Non-residential property owners notification. Now, under this plan, when we did the analysis, all nonprofit, non-taxable properties were included, and they were included because it's basically a fee assessment, no different than a water rate or a sewer charge. And finally, the initiation of when this stormwater program, if implemented, would begin. But I think that just summed it up in terms of the last year and a half. Some of the efforts the DPW, the city staff have done to present some program for your consideration.
I'm glad that you brought up the tax exempt properties, because that's one of the things that I think our city deals with as much more than a lot of other places, that such a large percentage of our land area in the city is not taxable. So the tax-paying properties are paying the bill for all of these types of things, but everyone's getting the benefit of it. And I think if there's anything appealing to me about that, it would be that. And it helps to spread the burden a little bit more evenly.
Yeah,
They uniquely also have large amounts of not pervious.
You have big parking lots and
Parking
so on,
lots
yeah.
and pavers.
Well, that's interesting you brought that up. There is a provision too in the stormwater program that if an individual wishes to put in like a rain garden or a rain barrel or something like that, credits can be given up to 50%, which is usually the number for people that implement some sort of stormwater management control on their property. This will also include, the non-residential too. So there's some options here also for people to control their runoff.
Questions from council? No? Thank you for giving us the information, something for us to consider. Even consider long-term, how we're gonna handle those things.
I think from, from the staff perspective, is this something that the majority of council is interested in having us continue to pursue this as an option, or not? Not saying you're implementing it, but do you want it to continue to be pursued?
Oh, I think
As
it's
a possibility.
well worth the consideration.
Okay. We'll keep working on it, bring you more info.
That's how the public
Well,
feels.
Didn't make public happy.
No, you just going on Jeff Winker's appearance, that's why. He has a vested interest in impervious.
Yes. Yes, he actually does.
There's a fire hydrant, so.
If when you review this again, you have any questions, please email those to me, and I'll make sure they get to the engineer and Public Works as needed, so that you can get answers to those questions, and we will combine those questions together and then give them all back to council and post them on the website.
Yes, sir.
So how does this all impact all the alleys? I know that look like the main streets, but how does our alleys impact this?
Well, alleys would be a level below the street because of the constraint of width. And what we look for there would be paving and drainage. Specifically, I don't know how most, looking at how most of these streets run in the city, most of the drains run across the alley instead of with the alley. Now, there are some exceptions. So the focus would be less storm sewer and more drainage, and making sure alleys have the proper camber. Usually streets go this way, alleys go like this to an inlet in the middle. So that depends on, again, a condition assessment.
Generally speaking, and I mean very generally speaking, we have quite a few sewer lines that go down alleys. So as sewer marks improvement, the portion that has to be disturbed because of sewer would be repaved by sewer, that percent to total. We do have some areas where storm does go down an alley. A lot more places where it crosses an alley at an intersection with a main street. And so still that percent to total of an improvement to that area is something that this could help cover. Right now, we have no revenue source for alleys. They're not on liquid fuels, and we just try to get by with the alleys truthfully with the funds that we have. So alleys have perpetually been an issue. I have, half jokingly talked about returning them to grass. Unleashing sheep in the city, maintaining the alleys, but yeah, it's very difficult when it comes to alleys because of the lack of revenue source. So this would contribute to some improvements.
Other questions, comments? And thank you, and yes, we want to continue the discussions about it.
All right,
So
I'll
we're
get in
getting
touch with
everyone.
you. Sure.
Okay,
Enjoy the trip back to Altoona.
That third item on the board.
Oh, that's postponed till April 4th.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you. Don't forget to hit the green button.
Just telling you right. You done now?
Just in time.
She's quick. She is. 5B, consideration of ordinance number 2022-03.
This is the second reading of an ordinance that would move oversight of street excavations from the Code Enforcement Office to the Department of Public Works. And this has been on the city's website and advertised. I received no public comments back. The second reading ordinance that's before you this evening is the same as the original one for tonight.
What's the wish of council?
Move the second reading.
Second.
Motion on the floor and a second. Any further discussion, questions, comments? Call for the vote.
Councilmember Byerly,
Yes.
Councilmember Conklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Missouri,
Yes.
Councilmember Stevenson,
Yes.
Councilmember Brinker,
Yes.
Councilmember Morris,
Yes.
Mayor Long.
Yes. I.C. Awarding the construction contract for DBG Piper Harmon Playground Project.
Well, it's okay that that's misspelled. That's actually postponed to the April 4th.
We're waiting for Richard to point out that it was misspelled, weren't you?
I got
The
it.
meeting's not over. yet.
Yeah, still plenty of time.
Oh, Richard, I feel bad for that man.
Any other unfinished business?
I had none, Your Honor.
Okay, 6A, new business, consideration of filing an appeal with Clinton County Board of Assessment for the tax exempt status.
This is part of what council asked me to do during the end of the budget season last year was start to examine some of the tax exempt property in the city and its current use and whether that still qualifies for tax exempt status. In this particular case of 300 Bellefonte Avenue, this is a parcel of land that is wholly held as exempt. It is 5 different plots of land. And a portion of that is used by a state office. It is also used by Family Dollar. and the Family Dollar parking lot. And so currently that is listed as tax exempt, and so that property is not paying taxes where the Family Dollar is located. I understand in the year about 2008 that this was something that had come up at a county level previously,
Yes.
but they didn't have adjusted house. So the law does specifically state that in order to be exempt, it has to be both publicly owned and publicly used. And I think we could all argue that Family Dollar is not a charity. So we would just simply request that the solicitor file an appeal with the assessment board of the county to have this reconsidered again.
Just the Family Dollar portion or the whole building?
We'd go with the whole building
The whole,
and see,
because it's
all
all
the
private,
parts.
it's all privately.
well, it's Stephen Gerard and it's a trust.
That's
So,
why we lost last time.
I see.
but we would start with all, but take as a settlement at least, the portions that are not actually rising
Publicly
to the
used,
law.
okay.
Right. And the parking lot is specifically signed that it is parking for Family Dollar. That would make it non-exempt as well.
Hopefully you're more successful than we were in 2008.
Never mind poking a bear.
Well, I don't like to be the bearer of bad news. Particularly not if I want to get nicked around the ankle. If memory serves, the City of Philadelphia City Trust was declared by Pennsylvania Supreme Court to be a creature of the Commonwealth and therefore immune from taxation. And that, I think, was the reason that this property got taken off the tax roll. And if we were to appeal that, essentially you're asking the Board of Commissioners to reverse the Supreme Court. I don't think they would be willing to do that.
Well, it doesn't rise to the occasion of the law. So it's up to council to decide as a whole whether it wants the appeal filed or not.
For just the, but we could appeal for just the Family Dollar portion because that portion is not being used by the public.
Sorry, I didn't make myself clear.
Oh,
The whole of the property is immune from taxation.
Yeah.
because of it being owned by
Because
the,
it's
of
owned
the
by a
trust.
creature of the state.
Yes, at one point, we had addressed it as separate. And I think the Gerard Trust had pushed the issue. We fought it, and I think that their determination was because the money was going to a trust that was basically the state. That it didn't matter, that we had to make that part of the building non-taxable as well.
Primary beneficiary of the trust.
No, it's for a college. But when a local businessman had to sell off 5 of his properties to satisfy his fines or penalties that he's had, and then they come in, and they go around the state too, and they buy up properties all over the state, and they're tax exempt. And it's just hurts us that they have this, and they're allowed to do it. We put in a resolution with PML at one time to have them lobby or make sure, try to change that. But Mayor Nutter at the time was president of the PML, so they didn't want to push it and make him mad because he was president. So they left it slide for a year or two. It's never risen back up that we deal with that at the legislative level, but it's just not fair to Lock Haven or any place that this place makes money and goes by more places as they make money. And every community that they're in is non-taxable. It's just not fair.
Right, and specifically when they're running the profit-making businesses.
Sure.
You know, you understand, the state's portion of that building, that, they're doing something for the public, but the dollar store is profit-making business. So the question before us, I think we've kind of clarified what the situation is do we want to make the motion to, ask the commissioners if we want to make an issue with this? Am I correct in that statement?
Correct.
I would be reluctant to do that because I think we are just pulling down a firestorm on ourselves because the Girard Trust will not let that go.
Well,
And while I applaud your diligence, Greg, in doing what you asked us to do, I don't think this is the one we want to find. Now, I'm more than happy for you to have that conversation with Justin, and I think he will tell you what I told you, but a greater length or a bit.
Well, in my 4-page email from Justin, that didn't deter any of his conversation. But I think it impossible to approach the Girard Trust and ask for a pilot if you make no challenge whatsoever. But if council doesn't want to make a challenge, and certainly there's no footing to make a pilot request if you're not going to make things uncomfortable for them. We can just let it go and continue to get no money. But we can also, in my opinion, do some kind of challenge to at least initiate a discussion of some type, which would put us perhaps better than we are currently in the city. It's certainly a no-win, or a no guarantee of a win, but it also is an opportunity to maybe initiate a discussion.
Well, and it sounds like if you wrote down, our expense is already there except for filing for the appeal. So we're right there at the end of it. Why not? Since all the work is done, and assess after that where it's going to go, depending on what the answer is.
And I don't want you to believe this is a fortune. Even if just the Dollar General and its parking lot portion, that's about $2,100 a year, but it is $2,100 that currently the city doesn't gain in revenue every year. But it also does give a price tag of how much time we put into the pursuit, but it would take us quite a bit to get to that dollar with the current solicitor and the work that he's done.
And I think we've been, this is a start, just it happens to be the Girard Trust, but it's an indicator of things to come that we are going to probably look into and appeal other assessments that we don't deem as fair or equitable. And it's not for just the city, it's for all the taxpayers in the city that we're fighting for them, because what these people get away with, somebody has to make it up.
Any appeal that the city were to, be successful in, whether it would be raising the value of a parcel of land or the improvement thereon, or changing the exempt status, or even entering into pilot discussions, those are things that benefit all three taxing bodies, the county, the school district, and the city. And any pilot discussions that I've been a part of included all of those taxing parties in the past, and I know that taxation wise, we may not all challenge the same things together simultaneously, but in the end, everyone benefits from it. And there is, again, no guarantee of victory, but you also kind of won't know until you try, is my opinion and recommendation. But it really is ultimately up to council on how you want this to go forward, if at all.
Well, I think it's important. I understand Rich's position, and as I said, I sat on the Assessment Appeals Board when we went down this path before. But I think it's important for us to step out and say, we think this is not right, it's not fair, and that it needs to be addressed. If nothing else, we go on our record as saying that we don't agree with this. With that, I'll ask if there's a motion to move forward.
Resolution 2022. I'm sorry. That's
No,
not, that's not the right
13.
No,
resolution.
you're
Well, you
moving
picked
the appeal.
You picked a good number.
Yeah, I know.
There isn't a number there, it's just-
2213, sorry.
Actually, no,
That's what's written on here.
It's on the top.
oh, you're looking at that. I'm looking at the order of the
Yeah.
agenda. Fine.
Second.
I stand corrected. Thank you. Motion floor and a second. Any further discussion? Call for the vote, please.
Councilmember Byerly,
Yes.
Councilmember Conklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Missouri,
Yes.
Councilmember Stevenson,
Yes.
Councilmember Brinker,
Yes.
Councilmember Morris,
No.
Mayor Long.
Yes. 6B, consideration of resolution number 2022-10. And we're both on the same.
This is the consideration of the mutual aid agreement for all participating political subdivisions of the county and the county emergency management itself. This is the first update since, let me get to the first page here, 2002 to this agreement. Some things under the law have changed, so this has been updated to reflect those changes in the law. It's been reviewed by the county and the emergency management personnel, and so it comes before council for its consideration of adoption for our fire companies.
What's the wish, council?
I'll move resolution 2022-10.
I'll second 2022-10.
Motion floor and a second. Any further discussion? Call for the vote.
Councilmember Byerly,
Yes.
Councilmember Conklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Missouri,
Yes.
Councilmember Stevenson,
Yes.
Councilmember Brinker,
Yes.
Councilmember Morris,
Yes.
Mayor Long.
Yes. 6C, consideration of the agreement between the city and CEDACOG.
What the city planner talked to this is a agreement for CEDACOG to perform labor standard enforcement.
So with a portion of every CDBG project, there's labor standards requirements. This is a professional service agreement for CEDACOG to take over those tasks. I believe is $3,000 plus some weekly fees that will come out of project funds from CDBG. So there's no cost to the city. I will make sure to add that in the budget when we submit for the application. We'll just break even. They will take over those tasks and thus free up my time.
To write even more grants.
What's the wish of council?
I'm in consideration of the. What number this one is.
It's just a degree.
Okay, of the.
Second.
Motion floor and a second. Any further discussion, questions, comments?
Under the identification, I read it as the CEDACOG moves up, they're not responsible. But if we're held to the task, they'll come to defend us. So I just thought, wow, what a good job. Just, we'll pay you, and then if you make a mistake or we get in trouble, there's no ramifications for you, not for you, but for CEDACOG. So that's why I asked that. So on page 4 of that agreement at the top.
Well, as I read it, the city indemnifies CEDACOG for any of the next 3 lines committed by or from the city, and vice versa, CEDACOG indemnifies the city for any actions taken by CEDACOG. Is that?
That's correct. If there are any errors and omissions, each of our insurances would be responsible for that, depending on whose error or omission it was.
I mean, I understand this is a boilerplate. It's the same agreement for everybody that they deal with, but I just thought it just jumped out at me like that, so.
But the opposite is true as well.
Yeah, if we don't know something to give them. So there's very little coming from us if they're just doing labor standards, let the wage rates and contract. Because I did those myself too. Every single day and every week and every contractor I had to deal with, I had to do the labor rates.
Well, in that,
And there was nothing,
right, we have very little liability then, they have greater liability. But they still would be responsible for that liability.
Any other comments?
no, and I think they do well. I think they do a good job at it. And it is time consuming and it will free up our planner. I think it's well worth the money that we may spend, and someday maybe once we become more experienced at these contracts, it's not a really hard thing to do, but it takes time. So maybe we can start to do it in-house in the future.
I would not bank on that.
Yeah.
The number of grants that there are available that we traditionally have not pursued, because we do things like the wage rates in-house. Now that is fiscally important for the long-term survival of this city, is to pursue as many grants as possible. So applying for grants is the least time-consuming portion of any grant. The most time-consuming is the compliance with the grant. That's why there are a dime a dozen agencies that'll write grants for you and take a cut of whatever the grant admin comes in at, but very few that want to administer that grant for you. And so, you know, Abby is exceptionally good at administration of a lot of things, and she's very good at wage rates. But wage rates is definitely something that can take up a great deal of time.
It's sort of.
And it
special.
doesn't have to do with the experience you have. You can't interview someone faster because you've done it for 20 years. It takes the amount of time it takes to interview someone at the job site, find out what they're actually doing. Does that match the job description for what they're being paid under the state wage rate? So it's just one of those tasks that's administrative enough that you can sublet to someone. And that frees up enough time so that we can maybe add one more grant this year, because we'll have more time for administration of that.
Richard, you were gonna say something?
Really, in the spirit of former council member Forbes, and recognizing that this is a boilerplate agreement, I'm nonetheless struck under non-discrimination by a whole laundry list of people against whom you may not discriminate, which adds up to anybody. But you can discriminate against people of a certain age in hiring, but not in advertising for hiring. And then we get to the attachment on non-discrimination and sexual harassment, and we have a whole different laundry list of matters on which we may not discriminate. And I understand the beneficent intent behind this, but it would be good if we finally got one composite list of the people against whom we should not discriminate, and at the end of the day, it boils down to anybody.
Anything else?
No.
Any other comments, questions? Call for the vote.
Councilmember Riley,
Yes.
Councilmember Conklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Missouri,
Yes.
Councilmember Stevenson,
Yes.
Councilmember Brinker,
Yes.
Councilmember Morris,
Yes.
Mayor Long.
Yes. 6D, consideration of resolution number 2022-11.
This is the annual request to the county for $4,000 allocation from its liquid fuels allotment to help pay for the interchange lighting agreement under the cost sharing agreement between PennDOT, the county, and the city.
So wish of council?
I move the application for county aid.
Second.
Motion to the floor and a second. Is there any further discussion on that? Call for the vote.
Councilmember Riley,
Yes.
Councilmember Conklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Missouri,
Yes.
Councilmember Stevenson,
Yes.
Councilmember Brinker,
Yes.
Councilmember Morris,
Yes.
Mayor Long.
Yes. 6E, consideration of resolution number 2022-12.
This is a request from the Municipal League for, once again, council to take up the issue of local use of radar, which was pulled from the floor, although it had majority bipartisan support. It was pulled by Representative Benninghoff from being considered on the floor. And so now there's movement again on it. And so the Pennsylvania Municipal League is once again asked the council address this and get this into the hands of our local elected state representative and also our state senator. The Senate consistently passes this. The House doesn't let it come to the floor, although there is a majority that supports it. We would be then the 50th of the 50 states to permit the local use of radar. So because we don't use radar, we have to give about an 11 to 12 mile per hour leeway before we can pull someone over, or the state police can pull you over for exceeding the marked speed limit because they can use radar. So it certainly would help in areas where people perpetually complain in our community that people are going too fast. They are going too fast, but they aren't going fast enough for us to issue a ticket because we can't use radar. As silly as that.
I move the resolution.
Second.
Motion on the floor and a second. Any further discussion?
Well, I have a question. The last whereas, last word, would you prefer it to be country rather than county?
I suppose, and I'll let the municipal league know that. Because I just cut and paste theirs.
And the other thing is, when it says use the same equipment as the Pennsylvania State Police, does that mean the same equipment or equipment in the same way as the Pennsylvania State Police? Like we buy the same guns they have.
Well, in all law enforcement, the state determines what vendors you can purchase from. So if local use of radar were to go into place, we would have to buy from the state approved contractor. Same with like body cams. I think there's only 3 or 4 vendors you're allowed to purchase from that the state has vetted. But yeah, they kind of heavily control who the vendors are.
They have to be calibrated and certified and everything else
Right.
when you use them.
Even our stopwatches are calibrated.
Any other comments? We already have a motion, right? Let's call for the vote.
Councilmember Byerly,
Yes.
Councilmember Conklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Missouri,
Yes.
Councilmember Stevenson.
Yes.
Councilmember Brinker,
Yes.
Councilmember Morris,
Yes,
Mayor Long.
Yes. 6F, consideration of resolution number 2022-13.
In further proof that I was writing this at after 5 o'clock at night on Friday after 2.5 days of extensive training. There's no description for this. Keystone Central School District Board of Directors sent a letter which was provided to council. They passed a resolution and are requesting other municipalities to pass the same in support of a lawsuit against the General Assembly, urging the General Assembly to create and maintain fair, adequate, and predictable funding system as required by the state constitution. And so this is on the agenda for council's consideration. It of course doesn't cost council any money. And if you were to pass it, I would send it to the same representatives that the school district sent theirs. But the side effect is increased funding from a state level does decrease the amount of funding required at the local level. So right now, if you live in an area with very expensive homes in an affluent community, your property taxes percent to total are going to be, 3/4 of that is going to cover the education of the students. A quarter is going to come from the state. Let's say it's a general. I think it's about 1/3. So here about the same thing, you'd have like 38% comes from the state, the rest comes from property taxes. Because our properties are not as valuable as they would be in the suburbs of Pittsburgh, then that affects the quality of the facilities and the education that can be provided. And so this is basically a suit to press the state to increase the amount of funding it provides to local school districts, removing that burden from local taxpayers who are real estate taxpayers. The state's tax comes from earned income. So those actually earning a living pay that tax. Local taxes, your real estate doesn't care if you're unemployed or if you're retired. The real estate tax just cares that it gets paid, so.
What's the wish of council?
I'd move the resolution.
I have a motion. And a second. Any further discussion?
Should we correct the number of the resolution?
They will all be corrected.
Okay.
They're all one off.
Richard?
I seem to have a night where I am to city council what Representative Benningoff is to sensible reform. But I assume the school district wrote this resolution, is that right?
No. It is. Not the district itself.
The board of directors.
No, it was provided to the district by the entity that is pressing the suit.
But it says here, we're being asked on behalf of the Keystone Central School Board of Directors.
Correct.
Okay.
The following language is from Education Voters of Pennsylvania.
Well, and the problem with it is that one, the education clause of the Constitution does not guarantee a right of education to anybody. It imposes on the Commonwealth an obligation to adopt an education standard that meets the needs of the Commonwealth, which is not the same thing. You know, there are 16 state constitutions that contain some version of the words thorough and efficient. There are 3 state constitutions that contain the word children. There is only one constitution, and it's ours, that makes the limiting condition that it should serve the needs of the Commonwealth. So I don't know where they're going with this lawsuit that's been going for 7 years, but it is unlikely in my view to achieve anything. And I would also quarrel with the suggestion that the General Assembly is defined by setting PSSA standards what a thorough education is. There is no way that it does that. So I honestly don't know what we are supposed to add to the discussion by passing this resolution. I think it is a misguided resolution, and I would far rather the city does nothing wrong. And I still don't understand why we need to send 2 copies of it to Senator Cormann, who either will be governor next year or will be out of government.
I guess he might indeed end up being governor. I think I'd rather know. Because he might indeed end up being governor. Probably be good for him to know if he happens to end up being.
If Senator Cormann becomes governor, we have bigger problems to worry about.
Well, that would be a discussion for a different time in a different place. Okay.
All things start at grassroots, and if this is a grassroots campaign or an initiative to try to get them to for equal equity amongst paying out for students, then I support that, because the more the school district gets for the kids, also the less real estate tax that that we are burdened with too, that it's shared with everybody across the state. So I don't mind supporting a grassroots campaign if it's gonna help everybody. We at least have to start out with petitions and letters of support and resolutions and, you know, things, when it comes up from the bottom, then we're at the bottom. So let's pass this and move it on.
Other comments?
Here's my objection in the motion. It really doesn't matter how you apportion funding among the school districts if you start off with too little funding. And therefore, the first issue is you have to get the right amount of state aid to education. The Commonwealth Court won't do that for you because it's a policy decision. And therefore, we believe that that's the issue. We should be pressing our state representatives to improve that. And going via the lawsuit will not achieve anything. And second, if you believe that the Act 35 funding formula is unfair, then there's a chance the Commonwealth Court might agree with you. But the Commonwealth Court will not tell you how to apportion it. So unless you have a better plan than the current fair funding, this resolution will achieve nothing. And so for those reasons, I think we're simply wasting our breath, actually. And we're not directing ourselves to the issues that we ought to be applying pressure. Sorry.
Don't need to be sorry, you're entitled to your position.
And I'm not sure that I fully disagree with you, but I will tell you that until we begin to stir the waters, until we begin to get the conversations that we started of how I'm dissatisfied the vast majority of school districts in the state are, then we can look at which why in the road we want to take when we get to that point. So I think we make as much noise as possible in getting to the why in the road. The fork in the road, I guess, right? It's not a why. So,
Yes. Any other comments? Call for the vote.
Councilmember Byerly.
Yes.
Councilmember Conklin.
yes.
Councilmember Missouri.
Yes.
Councilmember Stevenson.
Yeah.
Councilmember Brinker.
No.
Councilmember Morris.
No.
Mayor Long.
Yes. 6G. Notice of distribution from perpetual gifts to the State and County Foundation.
The Putnam County Foundation holds two perpetual trusts for the city. The first is the Hoberman Trust for the benefit of Hoberman Park. This year, the city received $598 of a distribution from that that goes into the city's account for improvements to Hoberman Park. The second is the Stephen Foreman Small Business Development Fund. That this year was a distribution of $735, and that will go into it does not go into the City of Lock Haven revolving loan fund as is stated there, because that's USDA funds. It goes into its own fund in the city, which is in your budget as Fund 55.
6H, Clinton County Association of Township Officials Annual Meeting Invitation.
This year, the Clinton County Association of Township Officials has invited members of council to participate. If any members of council are interested in participating this year, the association is meeting June 2nd at the Clinton County Fairgrounds. And if you are interested, please email me and I will RSVP for you on the city's behalf.
6I, Al Horman legislative.
It's Al Hoberman Day on April 1st, which is a Friday. At 11:30 begins the luncheon at the Parsons Union Building. And at 12:30, The open discussion will begin. Members from a variety of legislative branches, including the federal, state, and local government, participate. Lock Haven University students have the opportunity to ask questions of those legislators. And if any of the members of council are interested in participating in either the lunch or the forum or both, the contact information is on there to ensure that you get signed up for that.
Deadline's Friday.
Right.
6J, notice of the 2022 citywide spring cleanup.
Oh, yeah. The line before has an ampersand.
Oh, excuse me.
It's the timeout.
Timeout.
Yes, the timeout notice is included. If you're interested in attending the timeout, again, email me. And then the notice of the 2022 citywide spring cleanup is included for council's information. It has been posted on the city website as well as the city's Facebook page.
Anything else under new business?
And we can send out push notifications as well.
Did it update on the app?
It did.
Doesn't say how many, it doesn't say how many containers, so I can have as many 50-pound containers as I want.
Just show up, we'll handle it.
Right.
And we did the relaunch of the app last meeting.
Yes.
Just to remind the public that as a way you can complain, report things about things going on in your neighborhood. Facebook is the place to do that. Do it on the app so that the proper people get the complaint and they can address it. So download the app. So no other new business?
I'm on your honor.
Okay. Reports, authorities, boards, commissions.
Kind of light this time, which is good because it kept your council packet from being 85 pages long. But just the minutes of the tax collection committee this time for your information.
Anything else to bring before council?
I had nothing.
Anyone from council have anything?
I just have a request, noticing the map that was presented by the engineering firm for the street stormwater program, city stormwater program. I noticed that Perry Alley from White Alley eastward towards its former connection is shown on the map. I'll be more than happy to have that one street redone anytime you're ready.
Perry Alley is adjacent to the levee, right?
Yeah, and there's a few feet.
I'm sure you would.
Anything else to bring before council? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
We do.
We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.